Before the war, the worst noise I ever had to deal with was a misfiring engine in my father's garage back in Birmingham. A clatter, a cough, a bang that meant a long night with greasy hands and the smell of petrol. But here in Italy, the noises were different. They didn't signal a problem you could fix with a new gasket or a tuned carburetor. They signaled the end of things. November 1943, the Sangro River. It wasn't really a river so much as a torrent of liquid mud and melted snow, a churning brown wound gouged into the belly of Italy. The rain was constant, a miserable, chilling curtain that turned the world to shades of gray and brown. It seeped into your bones, made your uniform feel like a lead weight, and turned every patch of earth into a sucking trap. This was the Winter Line, a name on a map for the generals, but for us, the lads of the 237th Field Company, it was just the next impossible job. Our trade wasn't glory, it was sweat and steel. We were sappers, Royal Engineers, the Army's mechanics. When the infantry needed a path, we cleared the mines. When they needed cover, we built the fortifications. And when they needed to cross a river that the Almighty himself seemed to want impassable, we built the bridge. A Bailey Bridge, our masterpiece of prefabricated steel. To me, it was like a giant Meccano set, just with pieces that weighed a quarter ton and instructions barked by a sergeant who'd long forgotten how to smile. I remember crouching in a slit trench, the rain dripping from the rim of my helmet, watching the far bank. Jerry was dug in deep on the ridge opposite. We couldn't see him, but we could feel him. Every so often, a single shot would crack across the valley, or the sickening thump-wump asterisk of a mortar would echo, sending a plume of mud and water into the sky. Waiting was the worst part. It's when you think too much. I thought about the garage, the satisfying heft of a good spanner in my hand, the clean, logical process of diagnosing a fault and setting it right. Out here, the only logic was chaos. My fear wasn't about the bullets, not really. You can't do much about a piece of metal with your name on it. No, my fear was colder, more technical. It was the terror of miscalculation, the dread of a misplaced charge, a faulty detonator, or a bridge support that wasn't properly seated. In my world, a mistake didn't just mean a stripped bolt or a ruined engine block. It meant a dozen of your mates vaporized in an instant. It meant the failure of the entire attack. That was a weight that sat heavier than any pack. Then the order came, a runner slipping and sliding down the trench line. Bridge party up. The world dissolved into controlled frenzy. We moved like a well-oiled machine, each man knowing his part. Hauling the panels, the transoms, the stringers. The cold steel bit into our numb fingers. The air filled with the rhythmic clang of sledgehammers driving home the locking pins, the grunts of men straining against immense weight, the shouted commands of the NCOs cutting through the din. For a little while I could lose myself in the work. It felt familiar. Find the component, align the holes, drive the pin, check the seating, repeat. It was a brutal, heavy, dangerous kind of mechanics, but it was mechanics all the same. We were launching it across, section by section, on rollers. The nose of the bridge touched the far bank, a small victory, a cheer that was instantly swallowed by the valley. Now the real work began, laying the decking, securing the structure. We were halfway across when Jerry finally woke up properly. The first mortar shell landed short, a colossal geyser of river water that drenched us. The second was closer, showering us with mud and stones. Then they found the range. The air turned into a symphony of screaming metal. The world became a series of deafening cracks followed by the whistle and tear of shrapnel. Men went down. I saw Corporal Smith, a good lad from Manchester, simply disappear in a blast of orange and black. One moment he was there, tightening a bolt, the next, nothing. You don't stop, you can't. You just lower your head, make yourself small, and keep working. The methodical part of my brain took over. Hammer, pin, next panel. The fear was a cold, hard knot in my stomach, but the work was a shield against it. The tanks were waiting. The 78th, the Battle Axe Division, they were counting on us. They needed this bridge. Then came the sound, a direct hit. Not the wet thud of a shell hitting the mud, but a high-pitched, resonant crang that vibrated through the soles of my boots. The whole structure shuddered like a dying animal. A section of the bridge, about two-thirds of the way across, sagged violently to one side. A main truss panel had taken the full force of a shell. I scrambled over, my heart pounding against my ribs like a piston about to throw a rod. The sight was sickening. The steel was twisted, sheared through in places. A vital lower cord, the main load-bearing element, was buckled and torn, hanging by a thread of mangled metal. The bridge was broken, useless. Any weight on it and the whole thing would buckle and collapse into the Sangro. On our bank, the Shermans sat idle, their engines rumbling impatiently. On the far side, the first wave of infantry was pinned down, taking a terrible pasting without armored support. I could hear the frantic shouts over the radio. The attack was stalling, failing, all because of this one piece of broken steel. Our officer, a young lieutenant with fear in his eyes, was shouting, "Get back, get off the bridge." It's going to go, but I just stared at it. I wasn't seeing a failed bridge. I was seeing a broken chassis, a snapped axle. I've seen them before. Back home, you get the truck on a lift, order the part, and fix it right. Here there was no lift, no spare parts, just a river of death below and an orchestra of mortars above. My mind went quiet. The noise of the battle faded into a dull roar. The only thing in focus was the brake, the twisted metal. The sheared bolts, resourcefulness, that's what my dad always said. A good mechanic can make a part he doesn't have. He can make it work. "Sergeant," I yelled, crawling towards him, "get me the cutting torch from the truck. And grab those spare steel plates, the ones we use for reinforcing gun pits, and a heavy sledge now." He looked at me like I was mad. "Davies, what are you playing at? Get off this thing. There's no time to pull it back." "We can patch it," I screamed back, pointing at the gash. "We can splint it like a broken bone." For a moment he just stared, then something in his eyes changed, a flicker of desperate hope. He nodded and started bellowing orders. Lads scrambled back to the bank. Another mortar shell hit the water nearby, so close I could feel the heat of it. The bridge swayed and I clung on, my knuckles white. The equipment came. 2 other lads, Jonesy and Mac, crawled out with me. They didn't need to be asked. They were sappers. They saw the problem. The cutting torch hissed to life, a brilliant blue-white flame that seemed obscenely bright in the gloom. I started cutting away the most jagged, twisted pieces of the ruined truss, the acrid smell of burnt steel filling my nostrils. Every spark that flew felt like a tracer round aimed right at us. Jonesy and Mac wrestled the thick steel plates into position, one on either side of the broken cord. They were heavy, awkward. The bridge swayed with every movement. My hands were shaking, but the motions were sure. I knew this. This was my work. "Hold it steady," I roared over the noise. I took the sledgehammer. It felt impossibly heavy. I braced myself, my boots slipping on the wet steel. I had to use the heat from the cut and the sheer brute force of the hammer to try and bend the buckled metal back into some semblance of alignment, to close the gap enough for the plates to work. It was crude. It was barbaric. It wasn't engineering, it was blacksmithing in hell. Clang. The sound of the sledge on the hot steel was a pure, sharp note in the cacophony of war. A mortar shell landed on the bank behind us, and I felt shrapnel whip past my head. I didn't flinch. Clang, another swing. My arms screamed in protest. The metal groaned. Clang, it moved, just a fraction, but it moved. We had no rivets, no bolts that would fit. So we improvised. We used the cutting torch to burn rough holes through the plates and the damaged truss, then drove shortened steel pickets through them with the sledgehammer, hammering the ends over to create crude, monstrous rivets. Every strike of that hammer was a prayer that my judgment was sound, that the steel would hold. The fear was back, sharp and metallic in my throat. If I had misjudged the stress, if this patch failed, the first tank across would plunge into the river, taking its crew and the entire bridge with it. My failure, my ghosts, it took maybe 20 minutes. It felt like a lifetime. It was the ugliest repair I had ever done. A brutal scar of scorched, hammered metal held together by sheer will, but it looked strong. It looked like it might just hold. I scrambled back to the officer. "It's done, sir. It's not pretty, but it should hold one at a time. Tell them to go slow." He looked from me to the bridge, his face a mask of doubt. But there was no other choice. He gave the signal. The first Sherman started forward, its tracks churning the muddy approach. It crawled onto the bridge, the whole structure groaning under its 30-ton weight. I held my breath. Every man on that riverbank held his breath. The silence was absolute, as if even the Germans had stopped firing to watch. The tank reached my patch. I watched the steel plates take the strain. I saw the whole section dip just an inch, a terrifying, gut-wrenching inch. I could hear the metal creak. My heart stopped. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the catastrophic crack, the scream of tearing steel, the final plunge. But it never came. The creaking stopped. The patch held. The Sherman rumbled over it, slowly, carefully, and then its tracks bit into the far bank. A roar went up from our side, a proper, full-throated cheer of relief and triumph. The bridge held, another tank followed, and then another. Our armor was across. The attack was saved. I didn't cheer. I just slumped down into the mud, my arms and back screaming, my hands raw and blistered. The adrenaline drained out of me, leaving behind an exhaustion so profound it felt like I'd aged 50 years. I looked at my hands, covered in grease, grime, and blood. They were a mechanic's hands. And for the first time I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was in the right place after all. The battle for the Sangro went on for days. Many more men died, but we held that bridge. My ugly, brutal patch held long enough. War isn't about perfect solutions. It's about making things work with what you have, right when they need to work, with the whole world trying to tear them apart. It's the truest, hardest kind of mechanics there is. These memories are heavy, but they must be shared. Subscribe to ensure these stories are never forgotten.